All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're at a brand new time today, so hopefully getting some of our listeners from Australia tuning in. Today we are going to be talking about improving your smart buildings energy analytics with your BACnet system. So I'm really excited to have Tyson with us from BUENO Systems in Australia. Hi, Tyson.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Oh, wonderful. It's a nice, easy time for me to join.
Yeah, that was the goal. So hopefully some of our listeners are also, it was an easy time for them and sporting their Australian pride. So as always, for those of you who've joined us before, you will recognize we start with a quick poll. We just want to get an idea of who's on the webinar. That's going to help us get an idea of what information we should cover in the webinar. We want to make sure that it is as relevant to you as possible. So if you haven't already, if you can fill that in. While you're doing that, just a reminder, or for anyone who's new, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can just throw them in the questions pane in the webinar window. We'll get to those. I'll be keeping an eye on them. If they look like they fit in well, we'll cover them right away. Otherwise, we'll leave all the questions to the end. So we're not ignoring you, I promise. As well, this webinar is recorded, so we'll send out a recording of it to you after the session if you enjoy it so much that you want to watch it again. Otherwise, we'll be sending out to anyone who missed the webinar. So I think we've had our everyone's answered the poll, so maybe we'll just share those results quickly. Take a look at it. So we've got a lot of integrators and contractors and a lot of energy analytics providers. So that's really great. Some manufacturers and consultants as well. No building operators, so that's not totally shocking, but that's great. So, I guess I will share my screen quickly. So we're going to do just a quick overview of BUENO Systems. Tyson's going to let us know a bit about what he does, and then we're going to get into how they've used Visual BACnet, so what they used to do and what they do now, and how it's impacted what they do. So, Tyson, we're going to let you start. What does BUENO do? What can you tell us about BUENO Systems?
So BUENO is a fairly young company, started in Australia. It is started with 2 people. We had about 2 buildings, just over, or coming up to 4 years now. And we're a building analytics provider. We started within HVAC by connecting up to the BAS system or the BMS system. And from there, we've grown to over 250 buildings. We're coming up to 50 employees. And we connect to HVAC, CCTV, waste, vertical transport or escalators, anything within a building. So any system that you see inside a building, we connect to, we extract the data, and then we either produce analytics on that data or even just pulling all the data to a central location.
Okay. And do you do this through hardware or software or a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. I think the main thing that we look at it is that we're an analytics provider. So if our main goal is to provide analytics, not integrations, so we'll do whatever we can to get the data out, and we're very flexible and capable of getting the data out, but we're not tied to any one source. So if it's BACnet IP, great, we'll use hardware and we'll extract the data through some kind of softtrace or Tritium. If it's not, we'll either use some kind of building integration tool, or we'll use a pull method through API, or if they can send us a CSV file, we'll also accept that. We've even gone to the lengths of using web scraping to get the data off a web page. So yeah, we try to be as flexible as possible with that integration.
Whatever you need to do. That's great. And so what's your role at BUENO Systems?
So I've been with BUENO since about 3 months after it started. My background is I'm a refrigeration mechanic, but mostly I've done controls, so installations and maintenance and service. But now I was client-facing initially when we were a bit smaller. I've moved into the team leader for the integrations team. So we've got a team of 6 or 7 people. We're coming up to 7 people now. And we're in charge of getting the data out of those systems in the building.
Okay.
and also once the data is out of the systems, we also need to cleanse it and add data modeling. So we use Haystack, which is an open community about applying metadata to points so we can understand what we're looking at.
Great. So you're all about finding that data.
That's it. Whatever system we can connect to, we try and connect to.
Yeah. Okay, great. And you guys are just deployed all over Australia?
Yeah, so we have over 250 buildings within Australia and growing quite quickly. And we also have partners overseas. So we have buildings in Asia and North America and moving into Mexico and hopefully Spain. So yeah, definitely growing very quickly.
Great. Getting into some new languages there too. That's always fun.
It's always good for a free trip overseas.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit, when you're going to deploy these systems, you want to get data from these systems, what is that deployment process that you go through?
Yeah, so the deployment process is it's quite difficult. So sometimes we're stuck with very little information. And a typical building, within Australia, it's very rare for them to have a network contractor. On new builds, even on new builds, it's quite rare. So we'll walk into a building and have very little information. So we'll have to go in and do an investigation. Hopefully it has documentation, but a lot of the time it doesn't. So the first point of call is that we install some hardware or use existing hardware on site, and we do a network scan, and we also do a network test, which is what we were using before was Wireshark. But that Wireshark in itself, it's great, but it's very difficult to diagnose if you don't have experience with it. And even if you do have experience with it, it's time consuming. So the first step of point of call is can we actually deploy to this network? Because if we go onto a poorly performing network, we're going to run into some issues.
Okay. So what are the things that you're looking for?
Mostly we're looking at controllers that are, we're looking for protocol first. If it's BACnet IP, then it leads into a different set of questions. We're looking for, if it's BACnet IP, do we have controllers offline, and what's the response time? And that's the two most important factors for us. The other one is how many main controllers do you have broadcasting on the network? So it's quite apparent how badly performing some of these sites are as soon as we do that scan and load it up into Visual BACnet, and that gives us the evidence to say no, we cannot deploy here. If it's another type of network, we're actually limited to how much information we have. So then we have to start actually adding controllers in and doing some kind of ad hoc tests. So it becomes a little bit difficult.
Okay. So before you were using Visual BACnet, you would essentially, or even if right now if it's not BACnet, you test as much as you can. You might look through Wireshark for a few key things, network traffic, response times, and if that all checks out, you then deploy.
Yeah, and then we cross our fingers and hope. No, it's definitely we have to look at performance, and we engage the contractors a lot more to see if they can give us some kind of a pre-network test to prove that we're not having much impact on the network.
Right. Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about there was a certain site that we had talked about previously that kind of brought you to using Visual BACnet. So my understanding is you deployed on that site and the network looked okay going in, and that wasn't the case. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this was it was a shopping center, so quite a large shopping center within Australia. We deployed on site. It was in operation, so we're using the hardware to act that of the BMS. So we're using their main server to do our deployment, and we added it was about 11,000 points, and we added 5-minute interval histories to every single point. Not every single point, but all the points we require. And it seemed to be running okay. The response times were actually quite good, but what we found was we were actually dropping controllers off the network, and we weren't aware of this until our analytics picked it up. But straight away, it turned all the lights on overnight and made a bunch of units run for 24 hours. So not end of the world, at least the lights didn't turn off, so that's good. But
right.
definitely,
that's always good.
yeah, as an energy analytics provider, it's not good if you increase energy. So
Yeah.
from that point on, we were very, very cautious, and we actually found that it wasn't because of our system. It was just the network was overloaded. It was already having problems, and it was causing dropouts prior to us connecting. But by us connecting, it definitely made it worse. So we ended up splitting the network in half, and yeah, haven't had a problem since.
So when that happens, the contractor you're working with or the end user, what was their response?
They were pretty understanding because they had problems in the past, but they still weren't happy that we had that we caused this. It was lucky that we had caught it with our analytics. I think otherwise we would have had a very poor situation. But from that point on, we're very cautious because we're connecting to a lot of live sites and sometimes critical environments. So if it's a laboratory or if it's a hospital or something that's a little bit more serious about uptime, like a casino or even a data center, we've got to make sure that we've done all our due diligence.
Right. Yeah. So if something like that happens, the network controllers stop going offline, whose responsibility is it in this case to fix that, to deal with that?
It became our responsibility because we caused it. So we we raised the purchase order and we engaged the contractor and we helped come up with a solution because that was my experience in the past. But if we're able to identify it prior to going on site, it's not our responsibility, and that's exactly where we want to be because we're not a controls company, and we don't want to get into that. We're not a network company either. So we definitely don't want to be dragged into that situation. But it really does fall onto whoever's the last person touched it is now your responsibility.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about what you do. So you've learned from that. Now when you're going into a site, you do a network scan. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you do that, particularly with Visual BACnet, if it is a BACnet system, if you're lucky?
Yeah. So what we do is we have our NUC, like a little computer that we install on site. We connect up to the network on the appropriate range, and we do a network scan. We run Wireshark for there, and then we run that for, on average, about an hour. And we usually do 2 points. Usually we try and get it on the peak time, so on startup of the building. We really want to capture it when it's sending out as much data as possible to all the field controllers. And then we do an after-hour scan as well. And once both of those, we load them. We don't look at the results at all. We load them straight into Visual BACnet, and we just look at our results. If we get a good score, anything in the green, if anyone's familiar with Visual BACnet, we send that directly to the contractors and the site team. So anyone engaged on the site, and we say, are you guys happy with this response? If there is any issues, it's always good to point those issues out. And usually there's a reason, like a controller offline there's some work happening on that floor or whatever it is. But it does really take any required skills out of the equation. So now we can just do the scan, press the button, load it up, and it tells us exactly what's wrong. So we have a mixed bag of in my team of engineers or controls technicians, and they all have varying skills within networks. Some are really great, and some haven't worked on it that much. So this is a great tool to really level that kind of skill.
Right. And when you so you look at it, you see if the score is low, you send it to the end user and basically say, we're not going to deploy until this is fixed.
That's right. Yeah. So we've had some experiences where we've stopped deployment. We stopped the process of deploying to a site, and it's such a great tool to be able to push back into the contractor with evidence and say, actually this, because it's not about, we're not trying to point fingers or blame anyone here. It's definitely just about, we want to make sure we don't have a negative impact on the network, and we want to justify why we're not going to deploy to this site, and let's fix these problems. And if we can give them a list of problems, that helps everyone on site.
Yeah. So what has the reaction from your contractors been?
We've had nothing but a positive reaction from this. I think before, when we said we're worried about the network, it was all kind of gut feel. We really had nothing to back it up, and it becomes he said, she said kind of situation. And we really we don't want to start off on the wrong foot like that. We really want to be able to say, here's why we're concerned, and here's the problems that we think are occurring, and give that to the contractor so then they can look at it and say, yes, this is clear that this is definitely a problem. And it really takes, it just puts it in a situation that we're just doing our checks and this is just what we do. So there is no hard feelings, and a lot of the time it leads into work orders being raised for them and work being created. And some, there's one site, they knew there was network problems, but they had issues presenting it to the client. So this actually helped them get work orders raised.
Right. Good. Okay. So the client seems happy with it. You and a couple people on your team found Visual BACnet. Can you tell us a little bit about how you went getting your team on board and building this as a process that everyone does? How was the buy-in from the team, and what steps did you take to do that?
We're pretty lucky within BUENO. We've got a pretty engaged team. They're more than happy to throw anything into the process which helps improve our communication with the clients. So as soon as we mentioned this internally, everyone jumped on board. So we had a couple of people trial it just to make sure that they were happy with how it worked and the response we were getting. And since then, it's been part of our every integration we do. It's part of the process. So we average anywhere between 4 to 8 deployments a month. So that's 4 or 8 buildings or shopping centers or whatever it is, and that gets done pre and post the network scans now.
Okay.
So yeah, then there was no. It's an easy tool to use, so it was very easy to suggest putting it into our process.
What happens if you have a bad post network scan? Does that then go to you guys, or does that go to the contractor still, or what's that situation like?
That's when a bad network scan is, we haven't had one happen yet, so
Good.
I'm hoping that we don't cross that path, but if that would definitely be our responsibility, then we'll have to start looking at reducing our polling rate, because we are polling every 5 minutes. It definitely does add load. We can't avoid that. Yeah. But if that is the case, we'll definitely have to reduce that and maybe look at reducing the amount of points and go back to them and say, where can we look at improving our uptime?
Right. Okay. So do you typically give that report to the customer afterwards, or give something to the customer afterwards to kind of wash your hands of it and say, look, it's all working? Yeah,
we send the basic PDF to the customers afterwards as well. So they get the same one they got pre our deployment, and then they get the exact same report with post and showing that we had very little impact.
Right. Great. Okay. So is this something that you guys are on site for hopefully forever? Do you ever go back and take a look at it, or I realize that this is quite recently that you started using it, so maybe not yet, but is it something that you think that you would use on a regular basis down the road, or is it hopefully once you've deployed and been successful, then you're kind of hopefully done with it?
It's something that we haven't used yet, but we're definitely interested in providing. I know you guys are working on a tool that is like live recording. That is something that we would love to on-sell to our customers. I think that is something they're very interested in. Anything that has hardware involved, it doesn't work forever. So if we can provide analytics on that and on-sell that to our customers and create a peace of mind that their network is going to be stable and running, that's very important and valuable to our customers. So something we really want to get into. Yeah.
Okay. Do you find that in networks that in the past, have you ever come across where you might not have controllers dropping offline, but you're finding it challenging to get the data because the network's not working? Is that something that you guys run into at all?
Yeah, so we have a building at the moment, office building within Australia as well, that we did our network scan and it came back below 50% network health. And we're finding it very difficult to solve that problem. So they've gone back, the contractor's gone back multiple times. We've provided a lot of information around devices online, but it's been multiple meetings with them and them using the reports we've generated from Visual BACnet to then work through the issues. They've gone and replaced switches, and we actually saw an improved performance on site, but actually increased idle time. Increased controllers down and wait time, so response time. So yeah, they're still working through that, but it looks like that it's because they have 3 or 4 main controllers polling every single device on the network, which we're able to identify through Visual BACnet.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Any other big projects you guys have coming up? Anything else that you're sort of excited, looking forward to using this with, or sort of ways that you can marry our 2 products going forward?
Yeah, so our plan is to have the new tool with the live recording. We're trialing it at the moment. Like, we want to put in where we've got our own hardware that we're creating as well for integration methods, and we want to install that as part of everything we send out to the sites and have that as a ongoing monitoring. So the more data we can gather from a site, the better in my eyes. So I'm very excited to see how this looks across managed networks, especially in big shopping center environments, because it is a mess, and a lot of the time you will see very poor performing networks there.
Yeah. And most of those networks are fully converged IT operational security networks, everything on one?
It's becoming, there's a push for that at the moment. I would say the Australian market, while being, I think, quite advanced in energy performance, it's quite far behind in converged networks. It seems to be more of a North American thing, but a lot of companies and a lot of new builds are definitely pushing for it now. They definitely see the value of owning their data and then that data stream. So I'm excited to see when that happens, but at the moment it is very much independent networks and siloed. So
you'll have one IT network, one, is it like HVAC and then lighting and then everything's on a separate network?
It can be. It's kind of a mixed bag. Sometimes you'll walk into a building manager's office and they'll have 15 computers all hooked up to their own network. So it's like a nightmare. So but sometimes you'll see the lighting and the metering and the HVAC. That's common for them to be joined together. But then CCTV is usually isolated and security is isolated. So yeah, it's very difficult to be able to find connections between the systems.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I think we're kind of a mixed bag here. So it's interesting to see the geographical differences between Australia and here. Well, that's great. I think you provided me, at least, with a lot of information about how you've used Visual BACnet and our products, and I think that, well, I know that, you know, getting energy information, the more data we can get out of these systems, the better off the whole future of this industry is. So I do want to, if anyone that's listening has questions, definitely please put those in the chat. I want to make sure that we can get to those. And if anyone has any questions about energy analytics in general, I am clearly not an expert in that, but Tyson is, so this is your chance to have access to someone that knows a lot about that. Tyson, do you maybe, while we're seeing if we have any questions, do you want to tell me a bit more about what types of analytics specifically you guys provide and what things you look at in a building?
Yeah, definitely. So our kind of foot in the door, as we say, is HVAC. So we'll connect up to a BAS system, and the reason we do that is because you can clearly see energy savings when you make improvements to the HVAC system, and that's something that's very easy to quantify and explain to a client. There's other savings that we make there, operational and avoided costs, which are a little bit harder to digest sometimes if you don't have confidence with the customer. So HVAC is definitely a starting point. From there, we usually expand into metering, and that's, you know, it's pretty relevant and related. The systems that we have the most experience in after that would be escalators, vertical transport. That is a lot of operational improvement stuff. So uptime, failures, predicting failures, looking at idle times of your elevators. So your idle times on floors, who's locked out the elevator. From there we can do fire systems, so it's a very interesting one. So that's a lot around risk and compliance. We can actually see what boards are isolated. So if you have a smoke zone in isolation across a portfolio of buildings, the risk team are very interested in seeing like what isolations do we have active on all our fire systems. If you have an isolation on a board and there's a fire on site, within Australia anyway, the board of that company can be dragged into court for being responsible. So
Wow.
it's quite important to be able to eliminate that risk. So they'll definitely throw money at that kind of stuff. But also it's quite interesting, if you have a fire alarm go off within your building, your HVAC system has to operate in certain requirements. We call them fire matrix. So if you connect it to both those systems, any false fire alarms that you experience during the week or month, we can see how the system reacts and produce a pre-fire test results. And that's sent out to the contractors, and then they can work on those results before they actually do the fire test once a year. So you can, starting fixing problems before you go after hours and do a full function fire test. Another one is car park systems. It's really interesting. It's we can monitor the amount of traffic coming through certain areas of the car park, or if we have regular reattending customers. So if you have a car park that's near other venues, a lot of people will park there and then use that as their parking spot and go elsewhere outside the center. So we can actually start looking at how can we increase the capture rate. So if you have people counting and car park data, and you do new signage, or you open a new store, or you have some kind of giveaway or marketing campaign, you can actually measure how successful that is via your capture rate. It's been very interesting to see like other teams within an organization grab the data that we made available to the operations team. So in this case, the marketing team logged on and started using our data stream. And it's something that we didn't initially think that was going to be useful, but has led into a whole new avenue of business for us.
I guess I'm a little bit biased because I am a marketing person, but that is fascinating to think about the other implications of what you can do with this data once you manage to collect it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we're going to lead into is solving problems for our customers, and that's all we're really looking to do. So a lot of these systems we started connecting to was because the customer asked us, like, can you do anything with this? Like, I'm having problems with my waste system, or my my vertical transport, or my fire system, and that's how we started connecting to these other systems.
That's amazing. So we have a question from Jessica here. Thanks, Jessica. How do you deal with extra traffic in a converged network? So if you are dealing with a converged network, how do you deal with the fact that there's that much extra traffic? And does this affect how you deploy the system? Yeah,
so this is where it's really important to do those pre-network tests. If we have a huge amount of traffic on a converged system, it's gonna add a huge amount of load. So what we do is the pre-network test, and we look at that response time. And if that response time is very good, then we'll say we're very comfortable in deploying to this. But we've done systems in the past where it's at the network's at a limit, and we can only get X amount. So we actually offload our data once a night. And instead of doing it throughout the day when you have a huge amount of traffic, we store it all locally and we export it after hours. And that's something that with analytics, a day behind isn't the worst. We don't have to be live. It's not fault detection. It does do that, but yeah, if it's one day behind, we still can provide enough value and catch issues quick enough to fix them.
Right. So hopefully, by providing analytics, you can use your analytics to find a solution to that problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. From our side, we definitely see that converged networks have a lot more traffic, and sometimes you have to go with what you said with the shopping mall, where you just go on a separate network. You have to separate your traffic completely. But it really does depend on the type of network, how that network is set up, how much traffic it can handle. There's no sort of cut and dry threshold of how much traffic a network can handle. So it's just something that you have to keep an eye on, and if it starts impacting controllers, make the changes, unfortunately. But Visual BACnet should be able to find that for you.
Definitely.
Another question from David here. Do you have certain types of buildings that you are more successful deploying into?
Yeah, I think so far we've found that probably the hardest building to connect to would be something like a hospital would be the hardest, I would say. But the easiest ones are usually the commercial environments, the commercial buildings, because it is very straightforward. You don't have huge network runs. It's up a riser. It's usually quite simple.
Right.
And then in the middle of the middle ground would probably be shopping centers, and there can be a lot of the time a shopping center starts off with 10 shops and it grows into 100. And every time you do an upgrade on that shopping center, it's new contractors, it's new network protocols, it's new controllers. So all of a sudden you might have 5 or 6 systems on one network, and it becomes very difficult.
Right, the scalability can kill you. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Well, I don't see any other questions here. If anyone has any, you're more than welcome to send them in now. Otherwise, send them to me afterwards, and I can pass them along to Tyson. But thank you so much for being on our webinar with us and for sharing your experience with us. I learned a lot, even though I've talked to you a couple of times. I still learned a lot about how you've deployed your systems and how you're taking advantage of Visual BACnet. So we're very glad you are.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. There is a short survey when you leave the webinar, so if you can fill that out, that will help us give you more useful webinars. Thanks. Have a good day. Have a great rest of your day, or full day if you're in Australia, and rest of your day if you're here in North America. Bye.